All right, all right. There we go. That's a Grand Cross by Ringmaster. And hello, I'm Jayme CheeseSlice. I am the engineer producer of Uncontrolled Opposition. We have a good show for you today. We have Ted Postal joining us, and we're going to be recording about 55 minutes for the radio, WBAI, and the Progressive Radio Network. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Gloria and Jayme, our hosts for Uncontrolled Opposition. Hello, Gloria. Hello, Jayme. There we go. Put you on the
Hey,
screen.
Jayme. Hey,
And our
Jeremy.
guest for today with Professor Ted Postal. Hello, Ted.
Hey,
All
Ted.
right, we're going to get started. I'm going to hand over to Gloria and let her take it away.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guest, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Today, we welcome Theodore Postol, Professor Emeritus of Science, Technology, and National Security Policy at MIT. I'm going to redo that. I've been messing with this word, Jayme. I'm so sorry. Today, we welcome Theodore Postol, Professor Emeritus. I can't say this word. Emeritus.
Emeritus.
Thank you. Emeritus. I've practiced this word 5 times already. Emeritus. Okay, let's try it one more time, Jayme. I'm very sorry. Today, we welcome Theodore Postol, Professor Emeritus of Science, Technology, and National Security Policy at MIT. Dr. Postol has a PhD in nuclear engineering from MIT and previously worked as a scientific advisor to the Chief of Naval Operations and as an analyst at the Congressional Office of Technology Assessment. In 2016, he received the Garvin Prize from the Federation of American Scientists for his work assessing and critiquing government claims about missile defense. Ted is joining us today to deconstruct the technical aspects of President Trump's Golden Dome missile defense program, as only a handful of scientists are qualified to do. Let's also recognize that even fewer scientists have the courage and conviction required to expose the military industrial complex and its present king's trillion-dollar space folly. Before we jump into Golden Dome, let's review Star Wars. Not the blockbuster hit by George Lucas, but former President Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative from the 1980s, which was often called Star Wars. Spoiler alert. In retrospect, it was widely considered a total failure, a flopperoo. Star Wars was promoted as a space-based shield using lasers, particle beams, and interceptors to make nuclear missiles obsolete. Since the 80s, Dr. Postol's analysis showed why it couldn't succeed. Sensors struggled to distinguish real warheads from simple, cheap decoys like balloons or debris. Attackers could overwhelm the system with a barrage of missiles and other countermeasures, and the basic physics of tracking and interception didn't hold up against sophisticated threats. This made crisis stability worse, as Star Wars could encourage preemptive attacks. Dr. Postol also examined the Patriot missiles' performance in the Gulf War and found that official successful claims were overstated. Most intercepts were missed. The program consumed tens of billions of dollars, contributed to Soviet arms increases, and was eventually scaled back without delivering real protection. We understand that these programs persist despite the repeated technical failures for reasons that go beyond stated national security goals. Massive contracts flow to major defense contracting firms like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, now RTX, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, providing steady profits, jobs in key congressional districts, and political influence through lobbying. This creates a cycle where programs continue even when tests show fundamental flaws, as funding sustains industry and congressional support. Beyond that, the huge budgets and limited transparency in these programs, often involving classified elements, open the door to the misuse of funds. Historical allegations around missile defense have included fraud in contractor analysis, cover ups of test results and failures, and potential waste that benefits connected parties. Some observers argue these systems serve as vehicles to funnel taxpayer money into the defense sector with minimal accountability, effectively acting as a form of legalized money transfer or laundering through bloated contracts and overruns. This lack of accountability was highlighted by Donald Rumsfeld's announcement on September 10th, 2001, that the Pentagon could not track 2.3 trillion in transactions due to outdated financial systems. Rumsfeld's testimony underscores how trillions in defense spending can evade oversight, enabling waste or redirection. Additionally, the secrecy around components, especially space-based or advanced sensors, allows for the development of black programs. Black programs hide research and development efforts that can pursue unrelated or dual-use technology under the cover of missile defense, and are shielded from public or congressional scrutiny. It seems these fundamental problems persist with President Trump's Golden Dome, the current large-scale missile defense push. It's claimed Golden Dome will protect against ballistic, hypersonic, and cruise missiles using a mix of ground, sea, and space-based systems, with an initial $25 billion allocation, with estimates running into hundreds of billions overall. Some analysts suggest trillions will be spent on Golden Dome over decades. Dr. Postol describes Golden Dome as unrealistic, technologically unfeasible, and a major waste of taxpayer money with little to no return. He notes that expanding ground systems doesn't fix its fundamental flaws and argues Golden Dome faces far greater challenges. And like Star Wars, it provides an illusion of security rather than actual defense. Further, and no less important than obscene waste, Golden Dome risks escalating arms races by prompting Russia and China to build more offensive weapons to counter it, much like Star Wars did. In summary, Star Wars didn't work, and Golden Dome repeats the pattern. Dr. Postol's work shows these efforts don't enhance safety, they drive escalation, drain resources, and detract from more effective approaches like diplomacy. How about some diplomacy? Thank you. Ted, please introduce yourself to our audience and explain why you take both personal and professional risks to criticize these money-making space-based programs. Then please unpack the technical reasons why Reagan's Star Wars didn't work and why Golden Dome is doomed to fail.
Well, thank you very much, Gloria. You gave my talk, so I'm not sure.
I summed it up.
You got all the main points. Thanks very much for that. The situation. Well, let me first. There's a lot of confusion about what Golden Dome is.
Well, first start about you. I mean, it takes a tremendous amount of courage to take on, these big players.
Well,
what happened? What made you do it?
Well, I've been an extraordinarily privileged person. I was a tenured full professor at one of the great American universities, and particularly a great technical university. And my own view, which is not shared by everybody at MIT, but in all fairness, there are many people who do share this view, is that you have, if you're a scientist or an engineer and you have knowledge that something is going to be helpful or problematic, for society, there's a social contract that you're obligated to fulfill. In particular, the example I sometimes use when I've taught classes is oversimplified, but I think makes the point clear. If you're a mechanical engineer and you know that a bridge cannot take the load of people passing over it, you're obligated to warn people that this bridge is not safe. It's just, it's no-brainer kind of ethics as far as I'm concerned. It's so basic. I was fortunate or unfortunate enough, if you, depending on how you view it, to have a good, have a very significant knowledge on the question of missile defense. By accident, missile defense has become a gigantic effort, led by the United States. And this missile defense activity is not just costing enormous sums of money, which by itself means resources that are not available for other activities. And incidentally, if you're very oriented toward spending money on defense, the money spent on missile defense is wasted with regard to money you could spend on defense activities that are much more likely to return a useful capability. This is not an argument for more defense spending. I'm just pointing out that even if you're an advocate for large amounts of missile defense defense spending, this is a bad idea. It's just taking away from your general capabilities. But there's a more important underlying issue that missile defenses, and at least strategic defense missile defenses with regard to nuclear delivery systems, have what appears to be a contradictory set causes a contradictory set of reactions. By that I mean, even when the defenses don't work, they create uncertainties in the mind of the adversary that create very intense internal pressures to expand their arsenal in response to the possible threat of missile defense. I think we have seen a very dramatic example of that in the last few years in the case of China. China had a minimum deterrent posture, meaning that it said if we have a small number of weapons that could strike the United States and possibly other adversaries, that would be enough to deter them. But the constant preoccupation with missile defense that the United States displayed against China, particularly building missile defense radar systems on China's periphery, which are specifically designed to enhance the national missile defense, because if you're on the periphery of China with the radar, you can see missiles coming from China earlier and pass that information on to your missile defense, that's your national missile defense, and help that national missile defense be more prepared for the incoming warheads when they rise over the horizon of the curved Earth. So the Chinese were very aware of this. And there's very strong circumstantial evidence that the straw that broke the camel's back was the American insertion of a THAAD radar system, a radar system for what is allegedly another missile defense system, into South Korea. And the Chinese responded very aggressively against it, and they failed to stop it, even though they, tried to use trade sanctions with South Korea when there's a lot of trade between South Korea and China. And the Americans pushed this radar in over the objections of many South Koreans. It was, in fact, I I was asked to come to South Korea and talk to their parliament, and we lied to them, and our State Department was lying to them, and it was outrageous. I mean, our diplomatic people, in particular, an old colleague of mine, Rose Gadamola, she has this group, and they were lying. They got a good friend of mine, unfortunately, he's died, he was an assistant secretary of defense, and he was so angry about the lying that he went public and said the State Department is lying to the South Korean government and the South Korean people. So I believe there's a chance, I don't know for sure, that this was the straw that broke the camel's back among the Chinese leadership, where they reached the conclusion that to use a term, or to use an argument that's often used.
Ted, sorry to interrupt you. What year was that?
Around 2015.
Oh, okay. And who was the Assistant Defense Secretary who spoke
Phil,
out?
Phil Coyle.
Okay.
Phil Coyle, yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
And Phil was so outraged that he went public and wrote something in the Korean press about it. And it's this kind of dishonest behavior on the part of the United States that leads political leaders in other countries to conclude that the United States will lie to them about anything. And they will then say, what do we need to do to protect ourselves from these people who will lie to us and may lose touch with reality, because you easily can become victims of your own lies. And we see that in Vladimir Putin's thinking. I mean, it's very clear his worry is not American missile defenses can work. He worries that an American president might think it could work and thereby might do something that would lead to an escalating confrontation that would result in both Russia and the United States being destroyed in a nuclear exchange. Now, he's concerned about Russia's safety, but anyone who reads or listens carefully to him will see that he's well informed on the missile defense issue, which is not the case with American political decision makers. I can tell you not only from their statements, but I can tell you from personal interactions over many decades when I was inside the government as well as outside the government, being able to interact with people. And that's a dangerous situation when people sometimes could think that they can depend on these missile defenses in any way. I think this dramatization that occurred on Netflix, where the missile defense failed after 2 interceptors were fired at a postulated incoming missile, was, from the point of view of a dramatization, a good example of how people can deceive themselves into thinking they have a capability they don't have. And the details of whether or not it was exactly correct or not, it is really a silly, misinformed argument to get into, because it was a dramatization and it was basically correct. Details you could argue about, but nobody can predict how a nuclear exchange could happen. And so it's a very dangerous situation, and the missile defenses make it far more dangerous. They increase the chances of an accident where somebody makes a profoundly wrong misjudgment about what can and cannot be done. So the missile defenses that we have so far been working on have increased the danger to the United States. We now have China with roughly 600 warheads that could be delivered, mostly by ballistic missiles. It's going to grow. I think the predictions are about 1,000. It's not clear to me that 1,000 will be the number. The Chinese can easily grow their force to many thousands of ballistic missiles. The Chinese are tremendously modernizing their nuclear energy program, that is, say, power reactors. Those power reactors require a large amount of enriched uranium to operate. So they are naturally expanding their enrichment capacity. And that enrichment capacity, some small fraction of it could be readily diverted so that they can continue adding to their arsenal. So there's really no way to predict how many nuclear weapons the Chinese may eventually choose to build. And this is all because the Chinese political leadership reached a conclusion, which unfortunately I think may be correct. So this conclusion may be correct, that the only thing that the American political leadership understands is force. This is the argument that political leaders in the United States use to justify tremendous increases in our military activities, our military budget. Well, got news for you people. Other people can reach the same conclusion about you. And when they do, it's going to have a negative consequence for you, because the world is now a place where modernization is now on the steep end of the economic growth curve. Countries have now gone far enough in their modernizations, become well-to-do enough, have a large enough educated class, and large enough amounts of money to invest in capitalizing their country's wealth to grow at a very high rate. So we're seeing a world that is very rapidly developing as an economic force. And that economic force not only challenges us in the civil economics terms, which shouldn't be thought of as a threat, but does require that we compete fairly in the economic activities in the world, but it also creates the potential for large-scale military development. Now, if you look at China, I always laugh because when American political individuals, they're talking about holding China back. This is, if you wanted to draw a cartoon, the cartoon would have a mouse standing next to a gorilla, talking about holding the gorilla back. China has more than twice the manufacturing capacity of the United States. I mean, that's a factor of 2 is significant. Not only do they have more than twice the capacity, they have a more efficient economy. So when we want to build an Aegis frigate, it cost us $1.5 billion. It cost the Chinese 1/4 or 1/5 that amount of money to build a frigate that's essentially got the same technical capabilities. The Chinese are a technically advanced country now. They're not they're not some bunch of guys in rice paddies now. They are a highly technologically advanced civilization, every bit the technical equal of the United States. They are slightly behind in some areas and actually well ahead in other areas. All you have to do is read China's technical literature, which I actually read because they publish things of interest to me. And you know that this is a great power economically, intellectually, industrially, and militarily now, because the United States has forced the Chinese to do something they did not intend to do. I was in China in the 1990s. They were cutting the budgets to the military programs that I was, to people in the military programs who I was talking to. They were telling me that the government was telling them that we want to develop, this is the 1990s, so of course China is a giant relative to what it was 30 years ago. And these people were being told your budgets are going to be constrained because we want to develop the economy. And China changed, the political leadership of China changed its mind. And I can tell you why it changed its mind. The United States has become more and more threatening to China in a kinetic way. And the Chinese basically threw up their hands and said, well, the only thing the Americans understand is force. And we better go ahead and build a military that will unambiguously challenge them so they don't get the idea they can come in and sail up the Yellow River like they did, in earlier times. And that's what we're seeing now in China. And all this inflating of China threat and things like that, that's all been brought on. The development of China's heavy military capability has been brought on by American behavior. And missile defense is a similar phenomenon. So the inability for American political leadership to do any kind of technical thinking is a danger to our country, and we're still in that phase. We talking about system Golden Dome, which is a total fiction by every measure you can take. You could not build it if you wanted to. If you don't have the money to build. Forget about whether or not it would work. You would have to spend trillions, not billions. I want to trillions of dollars to build this system. We don't have trillions of dollars. In fact, right now, the United States is facing a major problem that is going to get significantly worse for us, which is we have all this debt in the form of dollars, bonds the U.S. government sells abroad, and major holders of that debt, like China and Japan, are beginning to sell that debt, and it's going to get worse. It's going to continue. And we now, to pay for that debt at the current, let's say, roughly 3% interest rates we're paying, we already spend $1 trillion a year in our national budget. If that goes up to 5 or 6%, we're talking about a couple of $1 trillion in our national budget. And it could happen because when the Chinese and the Japanese sell debt, they create a problem. The United States has to go out and find other people to buy that debt. And since the United States is viewed as a less sound investment, they have to pay higher interest in order to get people to buy those bonds. And we are in big trouble. I mean, it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not. I don't know, and neither do all these people who claim they do about what's going to happen. But the country is being managed by its own political leadership into a series of disasters, economic as well as military, that is going to plague us for many, many decades to come. And I think we will see a general downgrade in the standard of living in the United States over the next decades. So those of us who are already, through an accident of history, comfortably established economically, are the last generation we won't be the last. There'll be a lot of rich people because the distribution of wealth in the country is disastrously unbalanced. But the country is going to be a much more unstable place. There are going to be many more people. There are already a tremendous number of people who live from paycheck to paycheck. Easily half of the population. Half the population lives paycheck to paycheck. I mean, it's frightening. How does a democracy survive when so many people have to focus literally on their daily survival? So we have big problem. So this defense issue, which I have been involved in basically since the 1980s, has many tentacles and is connected to many other serious problems that the United States has, as should have knowingly, really knowingly, people who should have known better have maneuvered us into. This was avoidable. It was not avoidable that the world would develop. That's a double-edged sword from the point of view of American hegemony. But once the world starts developing, that developed world begins to have the military capacity or the ability to build military capacity to oppose the United States. And there are a lot of countries out there that are now reaching the point where they can prevent us or present us with significant resistance if we try to push them around, and makes a policy of bullying, which is certainly the policy we have now, and incidentally, not unique to Trump. It's the most severe under Trump, but it's certainly not unique to Trump. Those of you who are Democrats out there, incidentally, I'm a Democrat too. I'm a nose-holding Democrat, though, because if you look at the Democratic Party, which is the only hope the country has for getting back on track, and it's pathetic. The leadership of the Democratic Party is a joke. And, so these people think that they just didn't message things right. Well, they didn't. It wasn't they didn't message things right. They screwed a large number of the American public. I mean, when Obama, who incidentally my wife and I supported very early, my wife and I, when we saw Obama, we said, this guy is something special. And he's black, and he has no chance of winning. But it would be wrong for us not to support him seriously because he looks so talented. So we were in early. And let me tell you, I am extremely disappointed with what he did as a president because he had the potential to do a lot more and he didn't do it. And in fact, when we had the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis, he let these people in Wall Street rape the country. These people raped the country. They're richer now than they were then. He bailed them out, which he had to do. If I had been, so you have to bail them out, the country's economy will collapse. But he didn't send any of them to jail, and he let them run roughshod over millions of Americans who were defrauded into buying mortgages that they had no chance of paying for, and you could say, well, they should have known. Well, that's the job of the government. The government has to provide people with information that allows them to make informed decisions. The average person knows very little about finance, very little. I only know a little about finance because I have a wife who is an expert in finance, and she insists that I learn about her management of our budget. Otherwise, I'd know nothing. And so I'm a kept man.
Well, Ted, take us back to
Sorry,
what. No, it. You've given us a lot of information as to what gives you the courage and conviction. It's your conscience and your concern for everyone in the United States and the world to live in peace and not under this threat of nuclear war, and that these weapons programs only make the probability of a nuclear Holocaust more greater. So we do, I think, understand where you're coming from. Just some of the technical reasons why Star Wars failed. Some of the technical reasons why Golden Dome will fail.
Well, Golden Dome can't be done. I mean, they won't even get to the point where they can do anything. Let me start out, but let me just tell you, tell you what Golden Dome is. There's the argument, which is you couldn't. I mean, if you think the Strategic Defense Initiative was nonsense, this is more nonsense. The idea is, well, first of all, the program is supposed to be more than the space-based component. It's supposed to be an expansion of our sea-based interceptors, our ground-based interceptors, and a constellation of satellites. Now, the ground-based component of the missile defense would be interceptors that right now there are about 40 of them in Alaska. They're big interceptors. They're ICBM sized. They have no chance of intercepting anything. Those are the problem is simple. If you launch a warhead at the United States and you just throw out balloons along with the warhead, the balloons will look like warheads to the system. The balloons will travel in space along with the heavy warhead because there's no aerodynamic drag in space, and they will look essentially like the warhead. So you don't have enough intercept. One missile could overwhelm the system. You could have hundreds of balloons with a warhead, and the system only has 40 interceptors, and you typically would want to fire 2 interceptors per target. So that's only one missile. I mean, North Korea has the capability to overwhelm our system. So, and the sea-based interceptors, they travel too slowly, and the radars on the sea-based ships are too weak to actually see warheads at long enough range that they could launch the interceptors. How's that for, and that I might say was a system introduced by Mr. Obama. So nobody in the White House understood what they were doing, as far as I can see. I talked with Mike McFall, who's talks a lot and knows a little, knows very little. And, he was involved in this, and he knew nothing about the system he was promoting. Nothing. Zero. He had no idea of any kind, and he was out there promoting this system. And what he does is he blames the Russians for the failure of the reset that the Obama administration started with the Russians in 2009. The reset failed because people like McFall and Obama and the people in the American arms control establishment were promoting a missile defense that looked like it was aimed at Russia, even though it had no capability. Well, intent matters. And so when the Russians looked at this, they said the Americans are doing this foolish thing, but their intent does not seem to be honest. And they seem to be aiming this thing at us, and they can improve it over time if they're crazy enough to do it. And they're a very rich country. So how can we tolerate this? And the reset fell apart for that reason. It had nothing to do with Putin. Putin is blamed for everything. It's a very nice excuse. It's like saying, well, my brother hit me first, and so I was the one, that's why the fight occurred. My sister hit me first. It's that kind of argument. There's no merit to it all.
One of my favorite jokes that I've heard is when people say what cured us of COVID, they say Putin, because all of a sudden, we were concerned with COVID and people dying. And then all of a sudden with Ukraine, nobody was talking about COVID anymore. It just switched. So I totally agree with that.
So the ground-based components that are supposed to, according to Mr. Hegseth, shoot down cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, that has a 0 capability. So if you expand that, 0 times another number, still a 0. So expanding that is just a total waste of resources, complete waste. So they have this satellite-based system they claim they're going to build, another ridiculous idea. And the satellite system is a system where satellites orbiting the Earth. Now, you have to have them orbiting because the satellite will fall to the ground if it's not moving in an orbit. So a satellite has to also be in a low Earth orbit because the satellite is supposed to have interceptors on it that can fire down at the Earth to hit ICBMs that are being launched from the Earth. The reason you need the satellites is because the ground-based components will be overwhelmed if the missiles launched from the ground finish powered flight. Because once they finish powered flight, they deploy their warheads and decoys, and the ground-based system have no capability. So you're really building this satellite-based system because you have no capability, but you're adding to the no capability on the ground anyway. It's quite a tour de force in terms of reasoning. And these satellites, again, have to be in low Earth orbits because you're shooting at missiles that burn out at maybe 150 kilometers altitude at most, 150, 200 kilometers altitude. So the lowest altitude you can reasonably put a low Earth orbit satellite is maybe 400 kilometers altitude. Now, at 400 kilometers altitude, the satellite's only going to last in orbit for about 7 or 8 years. So if you want a system, let's say, to last for 20 years, that means you're going to have to launch 3 satellites for every satellite you want, for a single satellite to be able to do the job over a 20-year period. Then each satellite only has a limited reach. The satellite is moving at 8 kilometers per second, roughly speaking. So if a missile is launched from somewhere on the surface of the Earth, and you're going to try to hit it while it's in powered flight, and maybe at 100 seconds, that means that your satellite is going to be 800 kilometers away, moving toward the area where it might actually be able to engage this missile. So you have this dynamic situation where a satellite has to be in exactly the right orbital location and direction to be able to fly, to be placed over the area where the missile is launched. You also need satellite sensors. The satellite has no hope of seeing the launch from 800 kilometers. So you need other satellites in very high Earth orbits, typically what are called geosynchronous orbits, looking down at the Earth to see the launch. We do have such satellites, so you can use them. And then you would need to make sure you were in a position that you were going to be over the target. Well, how many satellites do I need to assure myself that one is going to be over a target area where one ICBM is being launched at all times? How many do I need? Well, it turns out I need a constellation of about 1,000 to 1,500 of these satellites. So we're already talking about to intercept one missile. Now, the problem you're going to face is that ICBMs are typically housed in underground missile silos in silo fields. And a silo field typically is hundreds or more ICBMs. So you might have to deal with a launch of 100 or more missiles from a single location. So instead of having a single interceptor or a single satellite, you're going to need 100 times that satellite. So you're going to need 150,000 satellites orbiting in order to be able to defend against a plausible attack. And that's not 150,000, it's 300,000 because you need three times as many satellites. And oh, by the way, you typically want to fire 2 interceptors at each missile. So you're talking about 600,000 missiles in orbit.
Our
So you
engineer,
begin to see this is a minor problem of arithmetic, if nothing else.
our engineer Jayme had a pretty simple question that probably a lot of our audience also
Yes.
has, which is, I think you're talking about that right now, which is why do we need so many nuclear weapons? And I think what you're describing, if I'm not wrong in understanding it, is that you need this because it's so hard to hit a missile. So you need all of this stuff because it doesn't work the way we're told it does. You need all this redundancy.
Yeah, well, on face value, if you were having a casual conversation, you hadn't thought about this, and somebody said to you, well, we should intercept ballistic missiles when they're shot at us. Sounds like a reasonable thing to try to do. I mean, the missiles are in space. There's not a lot, there's not much else in space, it seems. So it's not a lot to confuse, the missile with other things. Seems quite plausible. But then you have to sit down and think, which is a lot to ask of our current political leadership. And, first of all, the warhead can't be easily seen. The warhead is like a fly. It's like a fly in space. It reflects almost no radar. And the only way you can see the warhead is with radar. They talk about infrared, searching for objects in the infrared. That's correct. You can do it, but you have to have infrared sensors that are able to see in the right wavelength bands. Those turn out to be very difficult to build and proliferate in large numbers. So it turns out you're really limited to radar. And the radars you need to build are fantastic in size. They're like, 1,000 square meters in size. They have tens of megawatts of power they have to generate before they can generate enough of a radar pulse to reflect enough off a warhead that they can actually see the warhead. And then tracking the warhead is a real problem because the warhead may be accompanied by other warheads, and the radar beam is wide. Radar is not a perfectly narrow beam, so when the radar sees a bunch of returns, it can't necessarily tell which is where in terms of angle. So then you have to have a higher frequency radars to do what are called tracking. This is air defense systems typically made up this way. Well, if you go to higher frequency radars, because they can make a narrower beam and they have more spatial resolution, they are more susceptible to radiation, to radar absorbing materials. In other words, the radar reflectivity of the warheads is hundreds or thousands of times smaller than the radar reflection at the frequencies where the warheads look bigger. You got every problem you can imagine in the physics of this that works against you. So, you have to you have to take the trouble to learn something and to know something. Now, if Mike McFall had the intellectual integrity to sit down with someone like me before he went and told the Russians a bunch of nonsense, pissing off the Russians, causing them not to trust him, even though he was an ambassador to Russia. We had an ambassador to Russia that the Russians hated. I can tell you that because I have many Russian contacts. And this guy runs around talking about Putin. His solution to the problem is get rid of Putin, And the fact of the matter is the solution to the problem is get rid of people like McFall. I mean, we can't have these kinds of people managing our foreign policy. They're ignorant and they're dishonest. It's not just that they're ignorant, they're dishonest. He has to know. In the brief conversation or conversations I've had with him, I have told him that this system, this Aegis system he was talking about, had no capability. He ran away. He asked the question initially, and then he ran away when I tried to explain it to him. This is the kind of political leadership we now have. And that's under Biden, incidentally. So those of you who want to hate the Republicans, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and now the Russians have supersonic missiles. I hope I'm saying this correctly. Jump in, Jeremy, if I'm not, the Oroshenk missile.
Russian, yes.
So that's really changed the dynamics too. What do you think about that and these defense systems?
In some sense, all of these missiles have not changed the situation because they couldn't intercept what was there before. I mean, all this preoccupation with hypersonic maneuvering, warheads, and things of that nature, we have no chance of intercepting the standard conventional ballistic missiles carrying warheads and decoys. We have no chance, zero. We literally have no capability against these threats. So what does it matter if it maneuvers a bit? You also have no capability against that. You might have a residual capability. And so some maneuver removes even that residual capability. But in reality, you have no capability. So what the hypersonic, with the hype about hypersonic missiles is about, is giving defense contractors money. So the fact that the Russians have hypersonic missiles and we don't have them really doesn't change the balance of terror in any way. They can strike us at will. They could have struck us at will without them. And now they have these missiles. So now all of a sudden we need hypersonic missiles because Lockheed Martin needs another defense contract to build defense systems that have no chance of working. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that is funny. The other thing that keeps coming up is, these $1 billion bunkers that the wealthy are constructing to survive.
Well, that tells you about their commitment to society. These are the people.
Yeah, go ahead and speak on that, please.
I'm sorry. These are the people who don't want to pay modest increases in taxes. They have very large fraction of the wealth of the country in their hands, which is mostly due to the preferential treatment they get in the economic system. It's not because they're geniuses. Some of them know what they're doing and some of them don't. When you listen to most of them talk about areas where they don't, which is not involved in the specialized grabbing of money for themselves, they sound like idiots because they don't know anything. They think they're geniuses, but they're not. But they do have a special place and narrow skill set that allows them to get more and more and more money. If you have $1 billion, why is a 3% wealth tax too much to pay? I mean, a 3% wealth tax for me, and I don't have $1 billion, and I don't need $1 billion. I live very well without it. That's my contract with society.
Well, my question was more, do you think that these bunkers will work? I mean, because there's this illusion that they can be saved, that, they can go to Mars and live on Mars, or they can live in this bunker for so many years. And then when they come out, everything's going to be peachy and all of us useless eaters will be dead, but they'll still be there. What's the probability of them surviving in these bunkers?
If the bunkers are built well enough and they're not targeted specifically in the attacks, and, I'm not sure it's worth a nuclear warhead from the point of view of the Russians to destroy some shelter that these guys have built, unless they just want to make them pay for the world that they have created. Because these people are big creators of the world that is going to end the life of billions of people. Unless they're targeted directly, those bunkers can be made pretty self-sufficient and pretty strong. And, you can have your self-contained air system. This is not a cheap thing to do. Keep the radioactive particles out. You can have a big enough water system or water purification system because the water is going to be radioactive. But there are ways to clean it if you have enough resources for yourself. And they can survive. So if they want to live underground in these shelters, I guess it is possible. But this is just another expression of their cynical self-aggrandizement, because they don't want to meet their social obligations to society by even paying taxes or participating in the management of our society in a constructive way, rather than just embellishing their own wealth. And so the shelters are just another manifestation of their reckless disregard for the rest of society. And there should be laws against this, in my view. And call me an anti-capitalist. Capitalism should not include a small group of people raping the whole world and leading to the destruction of the world. That should not include protection of that kind of behavior. It should be possible to build wealth and comfort where most people are comfortable and can live with dignity. We have the capacity to manufacture so much at so much ease that there is no reason for people to be going hungry anywhere, let alone in the United States, where we're so rich, and be without housing and without dignity. There's just no reason for it. The capacity to cheaply manufacture things is so much there. It's our economic system.
But instead, we're going to build this multi-trillion-dollar.
Well, we're not going to build it because nobody knows how to build it.
We're going to say we are. And then divert the funds somewhere else, and then someone will stand up and say we're missing trillions of dollars. Whoops! It's the accounting system.
Well, we have the great, beautiful bill that gave these thieves, these criminals. Not everybody is a thief and a criminal who's a billionaire. I'm not saying that, but these thieves and criminals, who are a very large number of these people, even more money when it has nothing to do. They detract from the well-being of the country and the world. And that, I'm afraid, you don't have to be a communist or a socialist to make that observation. You can be a capitalist and make that observation. I'm a capitalist myself. So, you owe something to society.
Well, I think what we're really speaking about is this unbridled capitalism, this this predator class that has evolved.
Crony predator capitalism.
Yeah. So it's not, so much the economic model, it's who's in control of it and how it's policed. Sure. And, it was policed better at other points in history. It's not being policed that way now. They've reversed all of the protections that we've had.
Yes. We've got to wrap it up.
So yeah, we got the wrap it up. So
okay. You've wasted an hour with me, but
no, it's such a privilege to have you on the show. Not only because you're a brilliant literally a rocket scientist, and one of the few rocket scientists that has the honesty and conviction to take on an industry that is one of the most terrifying industries. I mean, what is more terrifying than the military-industrial complex? And for you to go and tell them they have mud in their eye, is extremely brave. So, it's an amazing.
They can't do anything privilege to me now at this point. I'm professor emeritus. They tried to do some pretty terrible things to me, to be honest. It was really shocking what they tried to do, and literally, in my view, they really tried to kill me. But they failed, and I was very lucky. I had a wife who is extraordinarily capable, and God knows why she loves me, but she does, and she looks after me, and she helped because I couldn't have done it without her. So
well, I think also these people that are successful because they are unencumbered by conscience. The things that would, make a a feeling human being say, no, I can't do that. This is a terrible thing. They just don't have that. They're sociopaths, psychopaths. It's just horrific.
Conscious is a curse. It's a curse.
Exactly. So, it's just an honor to have you here, and we are very grateful. Can you tell our audience how they can follow your work? Are you on Substack, Twitter?
No, I'm not. I joke with my friends, I'm becoming kind of an internet star, which is the last thing I ever expected in my life. I think if you just go onto YouTube or just do a Google search and say Ted Postol video, you'll find, there are lots of podcasts where I'm on and I'm talking about various things. And many of those things will be educational because I put together briefings, and they'll talk about the Iranian enrichment program, the attacks on Fordo, and they have charts and slides, and those are generally available from me. If you listen to the video, you'll find out how to ask for them, and I will send you copies of the slides themselves for those who are interested enough to look at them, want their own copies.
Okay, well, the opinions you hear are ours and that of our guest, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. That wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Please find us on Substack, Twitter X, and Podbeam. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Now, Ted, we're still live.
Yeah, you're still live.
We're still live, but we're not recording now for the radio, but we're still live. So, what I tell all our guests is don't take your pants off.
Okay, well, I have to go because I have an appointment, but if you have any last comments, Ted, you wanted to make?
Not really. I think, I'm not trained as a political scientist. Jayme will understand.
Although I think you developed good political instincts and insights from all your firsthand experiences. So and that's what I was going to ask about the group psychology, because in the talk you gave a few weeks ago, you had an interesting discussion of the kind of group psychology where all these brilliant scientists just go along with a system that, as you point out, is not even workable. Because maybe they're attracted to power, or there's this kind of group psychology at play.
Well, people, it's also people, the best, it's not a bad, the consequence is bad, but in some cases, there's many motivations why people go along. And of course, some of them, they're just afraid. Some of them have a sense of duty. They don't think far enough ahead to understand that duty can call for saying, wait a second, this is not a good idea. And I did it when I was an advisor to the Chief of Naval Operations. I told him when things were not what they were being claimed to be. In some cases, he acted on it. The only case, I think, in the history of the Joint Chiefs where they voted against a military deployment that the president had decided to do was caused by a briefing I gave the Chief of Naval Operations about the Peacekeeper missile, where I showed him that it would not be capable, that it could actually invite, because of a configuration the president had decided on, could invite a preemptive nuclear attack from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was, of course, the adversary at that time. And he took me seriously, and he sent the analysis I did to the Defense Intelligence Agency. They went over it with a fine-tooth comb. They found the analysis was correct, and he went and got 3 of the 5 Joint Chiefs, members of the Joint Chiefs, to vote against it. And they went up to Ronald Reagan and told him, we'd love to support what you're asking for, but we can't. So, so that, I consider that a significant accomplishment because I kept the country from doing something that could have gotten us all murdered. So I had my opportunities in the Pentagon. On the other hand, I told him things that he was very upset about. And at one point, he stopped having me in for briefings. I don't regret it. I told him the truth. I gave him the information he needed to be a responsible decision maker. I didn't inject my opinions. I just kept it all to the analytical issues. And if you look on the web at these other discussions, you'll find them analytical. If you ask my opinion, I'll give it to you, but I don't inject it into the analysis. The analysis speaks for itself or not. That's my position. So it's about time people started doing this.
Yeah, we need much more of that now.
Well, Democrats need house cleaning too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to run because I have an appointment shortly.
Yeah, I need to run too because I mismanaged my own schedule. So
can I ask one quick question for
yes,
Ted?
please.
How many nuclear weapons of these big nukes we have? How many do we need to set off to destroy the world's ecosystem?
We don't really know because we don't understand the atmosphere well enough. People are talking about nuclear winter. And some people have concluded, I mean, there's serious studies that suggest a few hundred nuclear weapons on large urban areas would be enough to modify the atmosphere enough to cause perturbations that would lead to mass starvation across the world.
Hundreds? I've heard it was more like less than a dozen.
Well, I don't know. I think that's unlikely unless they were very big nuclear. If they're very big nuclear weapons, they could. I mean, if you had a dozen of these Poseidon nuclear weapons go off, those are like 50 megaton nuclear warheads.
Those are bigger than Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Oh, yes.
Those are small tactical nukes, the ones we used.
Yeah. If you had a dozen or so of those Poseidon weapons, God, I have no idea. And I don't even think the people who have studied the problem, the UN has a study going on. And one of the things when they asked me to, for my, suggestions was to look at the Poseidon, because this is a 50 megaton nuclear warhead, almost certainly, or more, could be 100 megatons. It would be detonated under the water in the city harbor because it would set fires, because the fireball sets fires of easily 30 or 40 miles from the detonation point. So you're talking about thousands of square miles of urban area being set on fire all at once. The fireball would be so large and so hot and buoyant, it would rise into the stratosphere, maybe to an altitude of 60 or 70 kilometers. That's well above the troposphere. It would drag enormous amounts of nitric and nitrous oxides into the stratosphere, causing ozone reduction on a fantastic scale. I don't know what that scale would be. In fact, I suggested to them they ought to ask some atmospheric chemist to do at least the back of the envelope, even if it's not a full study on that.
Yeah. My concern is you're describing this destruction from just one. So why do we have thousands of them? Like we don't need thousands of them to destroy the ecosystem.
You got the wrong person to ask if you're asking me if it's rational. I mean, it's
all right.
momentum.
Well, I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
I know you guys got to run. So
yes. Well, thanks very much
Thank you,
for
Ted.
having
That
me
was
on.
very
I hope.
enlightening.
Thank
I
you,
hope,
Ted. I hope you come back again. Hope we didn't scare you off.
Yeah, I love your
I hope
talks.
you didn't scare your audience off of
No, it
raving
was
for
a
all
very
this stuff.
important discussion. Yeah, very good
You know,
insight.
it's the kind of information that
Appreciate
needs
it.
to get out there. More people need to hear what you
Yeah.
have to say. This is the kind of stuff that I grew up with in the 80s, and it
Yeah.
seemed to be common knowledge, but it just seems like people have forgotten. We need another movie like was it War Games?
Yeah.
The one with the computer that went crazy. We need something like that to scare the public about this again.
Well,
I don't know.
we need people need to take the time. It would only take an hour to understand in some detail what the catastrophe of a nuclear war would be.
Yes.
I have a talk I give. I've given it in many places. I've had people tell me afterwards, including students when I gave it at Stanford on a regular basis. They had nightmares after the talk. It's a technical talk. I stick to the technology issues and the science. I don't proselytize. I just tell them the facts. And it scares the bejesus out of them.
Maybe
and
we
it
can
should.
bring you back to give that talk
Yeah, I can
for
do
our
that.
audience. That would be,
honestly, I
that'd be
feel-
fantastic.
But
I feel all we
does
need to do-
slides. It does need slides.
I feel all we need to do is show that opening scene of Terminator 2 where you
Yes.
have the person holding on the fence and they turn into a skeleton. I mean,
Well-
that tells you everything you need to know right there.
Right? It's close to accurate, that scene.
Yeah.
It's very close to accurate.
Yeah,
It's very close to accurate.
that's all my generation needed. So,
I remember seeing it and saying to myself, they finally got it right, because they always focus on blast. But that
Yeah.
scene shows what the light and heat from the fireball does. Remember, I told you this big weapon from Poseidon sets fires 30 miles away. What happens if you're 10 miles away? I mean,
Well,
set
if
fires
it's-
at 30 miles. Can you imagine
if
what
it comes to weapons like that, I want to be as close to the center as possible because that's
you're along with my wife.
the nukes start flying. I'm driving to ground
Right.
zero. That's what I'm.
Right.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. This is great.
Take care, Ted.
And
Thank you.
thanks to everybody at home who's watching. And we'll be back next week with another episode. It's going to be pre-recorded next week, though, and it's going
Part
to be
5 on the octopus.
yeah. We're going down that rabbit hole and getting all the details of the octopus murders and how it's not too far from the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. So that's going to do it for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next time. See you later. Bye-bye.